Alright, here we are again. Welcome back to the channel, and on today's video we have a shootout between the Mizuno Neo Zen and the Adidas EVO SL. And look, some of you are probably thinking, does the world need another comparison video with the EVO SL? And my answer is yes, at least one more. Let's get into it. This video is in collaboration with my friends over at Roadrunner Sports. Now, both the Neo Zen and the EVO SL were sent to me for the purpose of review. However, no one at Roadrunner Sports has told me what to say. They don't have any editorial privileges, and all the thoughts and opinions are my own. With that said, you're going to be able to pick up a pair of the Mizuno Neo Zen for $150, and you're going to be able to buy a pair of the Adidas EVO SL also for $150, and both from Roadrunner Sports. So it's probably not going to be an easy choice because these shoes cost the same. Now this is actually going to be a pretty good shootout because these shoes are fairly different in a lot of ways, and I think they're going to suit different runners, and yet they're also very similar. So let's get started with some specs, and we'll get started with the EVO SL, which has 38.5 in the heel, 32 in the forefoot for a 6.5mm drop. Now the Mizuno Neo Zen has 40mm in the heel, 34 in the forefoot for a 6mm drop. So 6mm drop, 6.5mm drop, pretty close. Okay, let's move on to weight. Adidas claims that in a US men's size 9, the EVO SL will tip the scale at 7.9 ounces or 224 grams. However, in my size, a US men's size 13, the EVO SL tips the scale at 10 ounces even or 283 grams. The Mizuno Neo Zen, on the other hand, in a US men's size 9, according to Mizuno, tips the scale at 8.5 ounces or 241 grams. And in my size, a US men's size 13, it tips the scale at 10.3 ounces or 293 grams. So in my size, the Neo Zen weighs 10 grams more than the EVO SL. It's not a lot. Like, it's not noticeable when both shoes are on my feet. But also, let's talk about fit, because I think the Adidas EVO SL fits true to size, whereas the Mizuno Neo Zen doesn't. If you are looking to pick up a pair of the Mizuno Neo Zen, for me at least, it does run a little long, and I would definitely recommend sizing down at least half a size, maybe a full size. I'm actually curious to see if a US men's size 12, so a whole size down, would fit me well in the Neo Zen. But I don't have access to one, so I've been testing the US 13, and it's been absolutely fine. So look, I know the EVO SL is just 10 grams lighter when we go head to head, but realistically, if you were to choose a Neo Zen that actually fit the same as the EVO SL, the weight is going to be very similar. You all know the EVO SL as being the training partner to the Adios Pro 4, perhaps the EVO Pro 1, and we have a very nice shoe with some premium materials that is going to be ideal for training. Well, I think we can look at the Neo Zen in much the same way, as in this is going to be kind of like the training partner for the Mizuno Wave Rebellion Pro 3. Now, both of these shoes are non-plated, so we've only got midsole foam. And it seems to me that a lot of people are really leaning into non-plated shoes for their training. It seems like for a lot of years, a lot of brands have been just whacking us over the head with plated shoe after plated shoe. And it's very refreshing, at least to me, to run in a non-plated shoe most of the time. So it's good to see we have two fairly good options that are good at most kind of runs. And we're going to talk more about the ride of these and the kinds of runs that they actually excel in just a second. But let's dig into how these shoes are actually made. And we'll start with the EVO SL by holding it up. And you can see we've got a fairly traditional heel collar here, and there is quite a bit of padding coming around this heel collar, and it makes for a very traditional and comfortable feel. The heel counter on the EVO SL is just super rigid, which in a training shoe, I think that's a big plus. And if you ever have any issues with heel slip, you're probably going to find yourself favoring a shoe with a very stiff heel counter. Now there's no heel pull on the EVO SL, but we do have this nice suede accent on the back, which I think does absolutely nothing, but you know, it looks nice. But keep that in mind, we've got a lot of padding and we've got a rigid heel counter. Now moving over to the Mizuno Neo Zen. The Neo Zen is using a one-piece knit upper, and because of that, we have a one-piece knit heel collar. It's a booty fit, so there is no padding around this heel collar, we just have this knit material, and it fits fairly firmly around your ankle, and as long as you're wearing socks, I don't see any issue with it. I certainly didn't have any issues with it, and I found it very comfortable to put my foot in. Now the heel counter on the Neo Zen is very flexible. It's not like the most flexible that you see on some race day shoes where they basically have like a piece of paper on the back. No, there is a little structure to it, and we do have two areas of padding on each side of the heel. It's not really padding, but it is just a little reinforcement, and that's giving it a little rigidity. And when I say a little rigidity, like, I really mean it. There isn't much here, and if you do suffer from heel slip in shoes that don't have a heel counter, this may not be for you. But with that said, there are some shoes that I do experience a little bit of heel slip, or the feeling of heel slip. You know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't feel like the heel of the shoe is gripping my ankle, but I didn't have that in the Neo Zen. I actually had a very good fit, and I've got no complaints about this fairly flexible heel counter. upper. The Neo Zen also has this heel pull right on the back, which is absolutely necessary because this is a booty fit. You know, you can't just make the hole that much bigger the way you can in a traditional shoe where you can just unlace it and pull the tongue up and you have a lot of room to put your foot in. You don't get that in a knit upper. So sometimes you put your foot in, you just need to grab onto something and give it a good pull to get your heel seated in the shoe. So the heel pull is a necessity and it works well. Now, we already talked about the upper on the Neo Zen being a one-piece knit upper, and then as far as the overlays, you know, we got the Mizuno running bird here on the medial and the lateral side. There is an underlay coming around the toe bumper just to keep that upper off your foot, and then we've got the standard reinforcement along the eyelet chain, which is really needed in a shoe with a knit upper, because over time, if it didn't have that, you would really just like stretch the knit out and you'd never get a good lockdown. There is an extra eyelet hole in case you wanted to do the lace lock method, and then I previously mentioned these underlays right on the heel, and that's just giving a little structure. Oh, the Neo Zen does have a removable sock liner in case you wanted to take it out, replace it, put in something custom. But moving on to the EVO SL, and it's using a synthetic textile upper. It's a lot more race inspired than the knit upper of the Neo Zen, and by that I mean it appears to be very light, and because it's light, it's very breathable. Now, I didn't mention the breathability of the Neo Zen, but it is also very breathable. I mean, as breathable as a knit upper can be. There are lots of holes in the toe box, and I can almost like see inside the shoe. Of course, I've been testing this and the weather has been fairly cold, but again, as far as knit uppers go, I don't think I'm going to have a problem with the breathability of the Neo Zen. But it doesn't compare with the breathability of the EVO SL because it's just super thin, and I really can just look inside the shoe. Now, it isn't as thin as some race day shoes, but it's definitely towards that race day shoe end of the spectrum. Again, with overlays, we've got the 3 stripes on the lateral and medial side, again an underlay around the toe bumper, and again reinforcement coming along the eyelet chain. Pretty traditional setup. Now, the tongue on the EVO SL, keep it in line with that synthetic textile upper, is very race inspired. It is nice and thin. There is a small amount of padding, you know, in the places where it's needed, and I didn't experience any hot spots on the top of my foot when I cinched down the laces. The tongue is not gusseted, but we do have a lace loop right here on the front, which they make very clear by printing Adizero on it. But yeah, EVO SL has a pretty nice upper. Now, I didn't talk about the tongue on the Neo Zen because, again, one piece knit upper, technically there is no tongue. It's all just one piece. And just like that heel collar being one piece of knit, that's exactly what the tongue, or the area where the tongue would be, is made of. But I didn't run into any issues with the material being too thin on the Neo Zen. Like when I locked down those laces, I didn't have any hot spots on the top of my foot, and I did get an excellent midfoot lockdown, which was surprising because the shoe is just a little big for me. And by that I mean there's a lot of volume in the upper of the Neo Zen. So if you have a wider foot or a high volume foot, the Neo Zen is definitely one I want you to take a look at. But for me, you can see even when my foot's not in it, there is an overlap of this knit material right in the middle of the laces. So when I cinch those 2 eyelet chains together, it is bunching up that knit in the middle and it's kind of folding over. At first I thought that was going to cause a problem and I was going to get hot spots, but it didn't. It actually felt really good. And when I wasn't looking at the shoe, where I could see this overlap, it felt really good on my foot. Like I ran into no issues because of the size. Hey, that was a pun. Anyway, if I had to compare the fit of the EVO SL and the Neo Zen, I would say just because I generally have narrower feet, the EVO SL fit my foot a little better. But when I had both of these like on my feet, so one on one foot, one on the other, I can't actually say that I noticed or felt any difference in width. So they both felt comfortable. And I should say that the EVO SL is slightly wider than some other Adidas shoes, at least in the toe box. So if you've run in, say, the SL2, the EVO SL definitely has a wider platform than the SL2. But still, the Neo Zen does have more volume overall. Okay, let's come down to the midsole, because, you know, this is where the magic happens, guys. And the EVO SL is featuring a full slab of Light Strike Pro. Now, it's the same Light Strike Pro that Adidas featured in their Adios Pro 3. They since changed the formulation for the Adios Pro 4, but it's still a premium race day foam. And for those of you wondering, the Light Strike Pro is a supercritical TPEE foam. Now, on the other hand, Mizuno is using their still fairly new, maybe less than a year old, Energy Next foam. And the Energy Next foam is a supercritical TPU foam. And if you've seen any of my other videos where I talked about Energy Next, I really think it's bringing Mizuno to the next level, because before they were mostly making very firm shoes. Now with the introduction of Energy Next, we've got a very soft and plush ride, but not too soft and plush. But before we talk about the ride, let me just pull out this. This is a durometer, and I want to just get a numerical representation of how soft these foams are. Because, and this is probably going to be a little hard to believe, but the feel of the midsole foams in both the EVO SL and the Neo Zen are a lot closer than I ever thought they would be. So let's just have a look at the EVO SL, and we're gonna take some measurements here. Okay, 26. Oh, we went up to 27 there. What do we have in the front? 25, 27 again. Okay, so 26, 27. Now we'll look at the Mizuno Neo Zen. We'll start in the heel. Oh, 30. Now we're down to 28, 26, 26. It's like across the board. 25, 25, 28. So actually this is surprising, and I didn't test this ahead of time, but the foams on average are almost identical. However, I did pick up a couple of readings right here in the heel of the Neo Zen where that durometer reading went up to 30. And the higher the number, the harder the material. So that actually means that the Neo Zen is potentially a stiffer foam than the Lightstrike Pro. However, that is not how it feels in practice. Like when I'm running in it and I'm thinking about how my feet are feeling, I am definitely going to say that the Lightstrike Pro feels a little firmer. And this is particularly apparent when you first put the shoes on and you're just walking around. When you're just walking around and you're hitting your heel and rolling through, the way people walk. The Energy Next foam in the Neo Zen is extremely soft, and it does leave you thinking, oh, this is going to be a very plush ride, maybe even too soft for some. Whereas the Lightstrike Pro in the EVO SL doesn't give you that feeling. It feels somewhat normal. And I know normal is different for everyone, but when I say normal, I'm talking about normal for me. But then you start running. And the funny thing is that when you start running, it's actually fairly difficult to tell the difference between the two foams. Now, when you really dial in and you're thinking about your foot hitting the ground, I still think that the Lightstrike Pro feels slightly firmer. But the beauty of the Energy Next is that when you start running, it almost feels like it firms up, which makes it a much better running shoe than it initially feels when you first put your foot in and you're walking around. Now, let's just go back to what these shoes are actually marketed for and what they're good for. Because they're both non-plated, lightweight trainers. I would say that the Neo Zen leans a little bit more towards the daily training end of the spectrum, and the EVO SL leans a little bit more towards that daily trainer, but up-tempo daily trainer end of the spectrum. And yet, I feel like I'm being very critical of both of these shoes because the difference is actually fairly minor. And when you are running at an easy pace, both of these shoes feel very similar. Now, when you start picking up the pace, and again, I did go for a run with one shoe on one foot, one on the other, and when I was really like picking up the pace to the kind of speed where you'd be doing strides, even though the Mizuno Energy Next in the Neo Zen did feel kind of firm, and I had a good turnover and it felt good, I want to say that the Lightstrike Pro in the EVO SL felt just slightly firmer and a little bit more tuned in to running fast. But something that you also have to pay attention to is what type of runner you are. Now, first of all, are you the type of runner that likes a normal synthetic mesh upper or a knit upper? Because that's a biggie. But also, the rocker point on the EVO SL is at 60%, so it's further back than traditional daily trainers. That makes it a little more aggressive when you're running. So when I start to pick up the pace, the point at which I am impacting the ground moves forward. So at speed, just because of this rocker point, I think the EVO SL is going to perform a little better. Now, if I do hold up the Neo Zen, it's very difficult to see on camera, but we can see this rocker point where the toe spring actually starts is quite a bit further forward. And this is going to be demonstrated if I kind of try to do a rock test. It doesn't look like the Neo Zen really rocks much. Then if we try this, the EVO SL, you can see there is just a little bit more rocking going on. I tell you, it's very minor, but for me at least, that does describe a lot of the difference in how I felt when running fast. So I hate to boil it down to your foot strike and which shoe you should buy based on your foot strike, but maybe perhaps for heel strikers, maybe the Neo Zen is going to work just slightly better. And if you are a forefoot striker, perhaps the EVO SL is going to work just slightly better. But really, I don't want you to make a decision based on that. I need you to take all the information that I've given you and kind of compile it in your own head and let me know what you think. Do you think the EVO SL or the Mizuno Neo Zen is for you? Hey, how about aesthetics? Do you like how one looks over the other? Drop a comment and let me know. Honestly, when the EVO SL first came out, I was totally in love with how it looked, but now I'm seeing the Neo Zen. I think it's also a really sharp looking shoe. Alright guys, that's it. This has been a shootout between the Mizuno Neo Zen and the Adidas EVO SL. Don't forget to let me know which one you like. Be kind, be happy, run well. See you in a couple of days.